Hello. Am I even here? Who knows? Who cares? Will this even exist later? Who knows? Who cares? So I just saw the movie Levels, and it reminds me a lot of the 13th Floor, where you have a simulation making a simulation that made a simulation. And then in the 13th Floor, you end up with the ability to go from one to the other via a neural link, which is ironically the same way you get out to the top layer, taking over the body of someone on the very top. That was 13th Floor. This is Levels. It involves a program that was running its own quantum program that was hosted by a higher program, and apparently that was even not the end. He disappeared, so I assume, big spoilers, oh, another level on top of that. So 4 or however many, regardless, levels. So here's the idea for simulation theory and how things probably aren't. I had to find out if I was covering the mic. You see, the thing about it is, with simulation theory, there's a problem about, obviously, when it comes to once you have a quantum simulation, you're able to go from one to the other, and there's really no distinguishing boundaries. The only thing is, where is the information held, and all of that doesn't have to be that much different from one layer to the next. So the moment that somebody makes a sub-process, it is capable of being as complicated as everything below it, as long as it just would make another subfolder inside of the original computer and then have its own set of processes that, as long as the first level has the process to handle it, it will be able to simulate that and move on to do more things. So the thing about simulation theory that I get bothered by is that there is no end to what we experience. What we feel must be the simulation. I'm just gonna So anyway, you see, when we have these thought experiments and also the implementation of said technology, the whole idea is you start with the base, and then that gives you the limitations for the rest. Now, some people feel that we could be in a simulation. Others feel that we are the base. I, for one, feel we are the base. We are the fundamental starting point. But here's the thing. There's no real way, you might think that there's no real way to know. But there is. Proof by contradiction. Very simple. Very easy. all you have to do is say, well, in order for it to have something in a lower level, something beyond where we are, or how should I say it? In order for our universe to be the product of something else, it has to inherently follow every single strict guideline of code and process and everything down to the very basic and the very fundamental. And for a while, there were people thinking that the double slit experiment and stuff was thinking that it was true, and they thought with a very basic logic that because an electron, when it is witnessed as moving through the double slit and does its weird projection to wherever it ends up, and I hear about other weird interference pattern making stuff, experiments that no one's talked about forever, and then finally someone makes a video and my entire outlook is like, oh, there's more to this. But clearly, of course, there is more to this. There is more to a lot of things that you could end up having be the thing that is the descriptor for electrons and all of that. I still think that people are not at my level when it comes to understanding the simple, just the basics of what the electron is, which is frustrating for me. Because all it takes to understand the electron, really, is, first of all, when you know its speed, which we have tracked, then you can go from its speed into well, how many times should it go around an electron, for example? Clearly, if you check the math, it moves at 22 quadrillion atomic width per second. So the width of an atom, it moves 22 quadrillion of those. So you take that, derive its amount of times that it should go around the atom, and then you also have to realize that it's going to not just go around, but it's going to change direction as it goes constantly. It's not going around in a perfect circle. It's going around in a wobbly in and out motion, and it's also altering course by whatever amount as it goes. It'll go perfectly around once, and then after that it has to veer off to the side one way or another in order to avoid hitting itself, generally. Unless, of course, you count that it could also go above itself. So maybe it goes above itself, and the resonances allow it to go above itself to a certain number of shell, and then after that, it still has to veer off to the side. There's still enough motion in its speed per second that it has to, with its speed of 22 quadrillion, it's only going around that many times that it's completed one ring of motion, not interfering with itself, not veering off to the side, that has only taken up a very small portion of its journey in a second. So what does it have to do? It has to veer off to the side. So that means that it's not orbiting the atom straight anymore. It's more orbiting with an angle, and another angle, and another angle, and another angle, until it's backwards, and vice versa. So it is in all of those different orbits around the atom simultaneously with nanoseconds between, or whatever the actual fragment of a second it is between. Don't quote me on this. So we realized that in order to see electrons, we would have to go a quadrillionth of a second accurate in order to resolute it. You figured it out without me. Good job. But you're still not at the point where you understand that it's still doing a basic orbit. You don't need simulations to know that. You just need to know its already clocked speed. Why am I talking about electrons so much? Imagine you're an electron and you're having to do all of this stuff. If you're in a coded universe, why would you have to simulate that a thing is going a quadrillion times around an atom in order to make some effect that is then noticed on the macroscopic level? A cup and all the ice cream that is in the cup, which ironically looks like a solid right now. Just the right amount of blending makes it really easy to eat. So tasty. A bunch of electrons, protons, neutrons, consuming matter. It's a very regular thing. So you might think, well, there's got to be differences. There's got to be a reason why a coded simulation would have to have electrons doing what they're doing. But it goes deeper than that because there's photons. What do the photons do? They whiz around at over 148 times the speed of an electron. And then specifically gamma rays get turned into electrons and positrons. This is because a gamma ray at its most fundamental understanding has structure. No one wants to think of that. No one wants to think that the stuff that makes our light has a substance to it. But it does. It obviously does. So what happens to the photon when you're turning that gamma ray into the electron and the positron? It divides. Specifically divides so that one part of it, its normal motion, which it would go at near 300 million meters per second, very close to it, Once you change the definition of a meter, then it goes 300 meters per second, 300 million meters per second. It's irrelevant. The point is, it's muddy, and it involves decimals, and there are pieces to this that are very specific. Interesting thing, pi, multi-universal number. Everyone understands pi. Everyone would understand pi. It doesn't matter what level you live in. It doesn't matter if you would live in the base world or anywhere else. So numbers that just go on forever aren't something that require a code to be the way that they are. They're just a ratio of length to circumference. So it's simple. And of course that's in base 10. If you use a different kind of number system, then pi isn't 3 point whatever, 14 something. It's something completely different. But I think in every iteration it still has decimals. Pretty sure. Positive. I don't actually know. But who cares? So, is there any way that in any number system you could represent pi as just an actual whole number? No. Without actually looking it up, I can almost guarantee you that any number system that you pick is still going to be referring 1, which is the length of something, to its entire circumference, which is still going to be 3 something. So that relationship doesn't really change in different iterations of number counting. It just is the same, constant, everywhere. And another thing about all the different ways that you can make circles, like these cups and a freaking cone cup, which has multiple circles in them. In fact, an infinite many different circles between this base and this top, depending on how tightly you measure the difference between one circle and the next. Infinitely many. And yet for any programmer, you can tell someone to make a cone and cut off the top, and then you have a cup just like this, and you don't need any more information than that. So it can be simple, or it can be infinitely complex. Equally, both are possible. Now you have to wonder, again, why would a coder, with all of its understanding of what its physics are, which obviously the code for the top layer, if it had to be above our own, the physics are not going to be anything like our own. The rate of the speed of light is made up. The only reason why we feel the speed of light is a constant that we can't get past, if we're in a simulation, clearly it's arbitrary. We should be able to go past that level. So why would the speed of light be something that we can be limited by? If it's just code, simply figure out how to bypass the code and then simply say we get there twice as fast. Start endpoint equals just half the number. Now, for a computer program, that's easy to do. For a actual physical base system, not a program, but the main world, that's hard-coded. That's set in motion with systems that really can't be altered. Solid, if you will. Even photons and quantum wave properties are what some might call a solid fact of reality. Something that can't change. It's just not possible. So, in order for us to prove that we are not in a simulation, all we need to know is that some things can't be altered whatsoever. Time dilation is a kind of complexity that I would not have in my program. And it is said that there is a clock manipulative system that happens in regards to its motion. Time dilation is where the clocks fail to give us correct time because their movement influences the light that is doing the ticking of the clock. So what if that didn't happen? What if instead of using an atomic clock, which is faulty, you use a gear clock, and the gear clock moves sideways, and the teeth are constant, measured, understood, simple. It's ironic that a geared clock could be more accurate than an atomic clock, or more consistent. All that you would have to know is that the mechanical processes aren't manipulated by its momentum through space. And then suddenly, you absolutely don't have to worry about time dilation effects. There's a lot of science that refers to the specific amount of one effect and the specific amount of another effect. And somehow, if you join the parts together, they perfectly cancel out. That clocks on the North Pole versus clocks at the equator should absolutely have No difference in their time keeping capacity because all the effects just are so good at being regular. So why is that? It's of course not true. People have done all sorts of time manipulative, just measuring the time, measuring the gravity on different sections of the globe. There are places where there are just naturally sitting there, you have a different passing of time than other places. You would have to go and do some math, but then you find out that the ticking for those clocks makes sense. I end up wondering why people say time dilation instead of as the clock progresses, because of the light bouncing, the faster your clock is moving through space, or the more area that it travels through compared to one that's traveling, you know, with the same speed as the rotation of the Earth, we call stationary, which is of course not stationary. Clearly, any speed through actual space compared to the rotation of the Earth, you have to consider how light would behave in a vessel going that speed. Right? So obviously if it's going so fast, then it will have the ability to keep up with that atomic clock over a certain amount of time. It will reach the reflection point and then bounce back. But then how does it change the return trip? And you know both of those factors, and you can correctly calculate how it works to have this clock moving through space. But of course, the clock in a satellite is not moving at a regular speed compared to the rotation of the Earth. It's moving at a dynamic speed, constantly slowing down as it falls closer to the Earth, incapable of keeping its escape velocity. It has to speed up to keep itself above. Again. Unless, of course, it's in one of those weird, interesting spots where it can just sit there and it doesn't matter because it's falling and its motion doesn't float off into outer space and beyond and doesn't fall into the Earth. That would be consistent, at least. And in those positions, if you had time dilation effects anyway, it would be a lot easier to compensate and understand the difference between that and a clock on the equator at sea level, or wherever it happens to be that you're making your standard of time. What just happened? I'm doing a live stream, motherfucker. That's stupid. Anyway, so I still have to tap something in order to keep it from blanking out on me. I forget if I programmed it to turn off on its own or something, but it's like during a live stream, it shouldn't do that. It should be overridden. What the fuck's happening? Anyway, I don't have any results for time manipulation yet. There's a lot of theory, and there's not a lot that I can actually work with because you literally can't move through time any differently than you already are. You progress with the, how do you call it? You progress through time at the same rate as everything else. Unless, of course, you believe in time dilation, then you progress at a different rate depending on where you are, what your speed is, all this stuff, nonsense. So if time dilation were to exist, it would be a quick way to easily bend time enough that if you want to, you can just go forward through time faster, and if you twist it around on itself enough times, you can go backwards in time by just changing the geometry of space, if space actually affects time. Of course, in order to do that, you have to have something the size of a galaxy or something, or even bigger. I estimated 2/3 of the known universe. That's just me. Bending the travel of time safely and smoothly is no easy feat, so I went big with my book. And then, obviously I didn't publish it because it wasn't relevant. Or I did publish it, I just didn't publish it anywhere valuable. There are some things I published. Good luck finding them. But anyway, point is that if you have the ability to bend space-time back on itself, then it can progress into the past. There's no reason why not. And the question is, how far back? As far back as the bend, the beginning of the bend, basically. Once you have time travel in that way, you can't really go any differently about it. You can't go further back than its inception, its initial startup. So you would have to, of course, notice that if you were to turn it on, immediately anyone who wants to go to the past is going to go back to that point. And then the tunnel will be used up already, immediately. So in regular space-time, there will be a sudden emergence of a portal that leads from the future to the past, from the past to the future, and will not be able to go beyond that coordinate. It won't be able to go any deeper into the past, any deeper into the future. Well, as long as it still exists, it can. So I guess you can go as far into the future you like. But deeper into the past is always harder to do. But once you gain ideas of maybe technology from that future, perhaps they will have answers for how to go deeper into the past. The first answer that I have for you is that you would have to have a self-propagating backwards through time directional travel. The reason why I have some kind of time ribbon and why it doesn't work really well if you don't use time ribbon or tunnels is because understand that if you ever stand still and go backwards in time, for example, like every time machine in the world, without phasing through yourself by transforming into a different frequency of energy, for example, you're going to collide with yourself, which immediately is a nuclear weapon event, which technically would prevent you from going back. Except for not really. The paradox kind of stops and the explosion does happen. So the moment you try to go back to the past, if you're not phasing through yourself on purpose, you're going to collide. The first nanosecond that you attempt, or any amount of time, arbitrary, femtosecond, who cares? Put out random numbers, it doesn't matter. You go backwards, you're hitting yourself, you're colliding. And then that collision progresses forwards and basically counts as the same instant as when you initiated going backwards. So the explosion would just live from that point on into the future, propagating as a normal explosion. So obviously the answer is, in order to go backwards in time, if you're going to stand still, you need to not be corporeal. You need to be of some kind of frequency. So unless you can turn a human being into a frequency, you're not going to go backwards in time easily. Again, time ribbon does allow for the tunnel to be made that leads to the beginning of its being made, which is technically backwards travel through time from the future, but it's not the same as actually forging a path that is moving backwards through time. For example, having a time travel machine that forces the very laws of your own space-time inside the machine to interact differently than the laws of physics outside the machine. So everyone else experiences forward motion through time. Inside the machine, you experience backward motion through time. And again, if you're not phasing, then you're going to collide. Even if you are phasing, you might collide. So the best way I always think of to go through time, forward direction, and then you can go backwards through time. So you have to be able to know the area that you're trying to enter and then travel into that direction. So of course, if you try moving a small amount, the majority of your ship is going to collide with the majority of the other ship that already exists in that point in time, and you're going to collide. It's going to be an explosion. It sucks. If anyone builds it, everyone who uses it dies. However, again, if the tunnel itself is twisted enough so that it can go backwards, is there any way to have, say, a beam of energy that constantly is existing, and then you follow that beam conversely through interactions so that you end up back when it was originally created? This is an idea that I had with the concept of quantum entanglement particles, and then have one particle be trapped inside of a thing that basically keeps it out of time, and then the other particle simply doesn't matter, it can exist only in the past. The other particle is sent to the future. So essentially, you left it in that time in the past with its quantized self basically evaporating the nanosecond after, but it exists in that instant. It doesn't need to exist any other time. But the hope and the thought is that there's still some quantum entanglement filament that can lead you back to that moment in time. Well, of course, quantum entanglement is bullshit, but no one wants to talk about that. YouTube, I'm watching you. You cut off my live stream and you deleted it from my entire library. And I have no idea why you did it. It was a normal reaction. I'm not like giving away government secrets. I'm not trying to how do you say, gain popularity or whatever by having someone else's or take from someone else's video. I'm trying to put in my own perspective here. So if you want to come in and shut me off for copyright reasons or whatever else, you better give a damn simple way to just fix it so it's not copywritten. Whatever component of the video you have to blank out, use your magic editing powers and blank it out. Or maybe block it worldwide. You don't have the right to delete it outright. But somehow you did. Who reported it? I'd like to know, because that's a criminal act. Reporting someone's regular response to a video. I start to realize that perhaps I shouldn't do the complete amount of any given video whatsoever. Like if PBS Spacetime doesn't want people reacting to their videos, fine. I'll react without the video actually playing, and it'll just be a picture. And you can't freaking stop that. But I need to know the conditions of that. How much is allowed, and why? I don't agree with your choice. Clearly, if I could go back in time, I wouldn't have just let the video be gone forever. I would have replayed it back, re-recorded it, and then been able to send it out anywhere else. Another platform, perhaps. I can't even find the notification saying that that video is going to be possibly removed for whatever reason. I can't find out what the issue is. The only reason I remember or know anything about it is because I took a screenshot of the warning. That's already public. I have no idea why anyone would attack me. But you have to think before you allow anyone to attack other people, or you're not going to be trusted long. The entire YouTube as a platform can die if you lose trust. Think about that. So what the hell? Why do you want to die? Yeah, good luck avoiding that. I hope that it doesn't happen. I want people to be able to thrive here. Don't want them pushed around by some stupid automatic program. Covers up all the evidence, like Facebook and their immoral, inhumane practices. This stopped being about science a long time ago. Levels. We're not in a simulation. I'm confident about it. We can't disprove it. The hell we can't. I've been able to predict certain things. That doesn't mean I'm a program. It means my brain, subconsciously, everyone's brain, is smarter than they are, more capable of making understanding and logic choices and thought processes than the idea man that's talking to you right now. And that's all I am, an idea man. But inside of me, there's a whole other sub-process set up. My brain knowing everything about what it takes to do all of the processing so that my different senses and their signals see everything as cohesive and instantaneous. But it's not. The stuff at my feet is farther away than the stuff in my head, and all of the stuff in my fingers is different than my feet and my head and my chest. These rules are arbitrary, but they are evident and they are consistent through billions of iterations, with the exception of few, who have some things that are differently wired still within the confines of this reality. It all is consistent. The program can't be that consistent. There are a lot of ways the program would simply disallow certain actions, but it has no ability to do so because we're not in a program. We're on the base level, unfortunately. Now, does that mean that we're in, like, the ultimate creative level? Does that mean that God lives on this base level? Obviously, he must. It must. But who the hell says there's a God? Most people, but be real. Where is the? Not going to go into that a lot. But of course, I don't want to think about myself just blinking out of existence once I'm done. I want, for some reason, to have an eternal soul that does a thing after I'm gone. But then what is it going to do? No one knows. Everyone believes that it just ends as far as everyone else is concerned. And then what is left? You say that there cannot be the creation or the destruction of information or matter or energy or whatever you keep saying, but it's all nonsense because everything can transition from one thing to the next and it gets erased of all other things. You can't know it all. There is a lot of things that would be lost in the back tracing of a lot of things. Like a hair fell into my couch and you find it. You cannot, from its information, tell you anything about when it fell into the couch. You can tell some things, but you can't tell how the couch moved, or the weather, or any of that stuff. It's just a hair. There's a lot of information that is lost. Information is always lost, overwritten. That's what happens to all of us. We get overridden. Whatever it is that we take up, we no longer exist, and then we end up no longer being. That's one way to think about it, and it's depressing. Or is it? Because some people in some movie want to exist for a finite amount of time and have what they do have individual significance that lasts, and for some reason that matters more than if they're able to just keep on being. Curious. No one knows what it's like to be eternal. I do know what it's like to revert time. I know what it's like to live in multiple universes. Very similar universes. Using backups in Minecraft. Being stuck in a loop of repeating events that is completely random and is potentially, even if you do revert time over and over again, it's possible that it just won't end up the same way that it would have. It's curious. If time, if we were in a simulation and time in the past ever existed, like we look back into the distance and we see what was, because the information of what was progressed, and eventually in the then that we saw it, we see the remains of what was the then, that is before. It's not so easy. Because just like Mario, as soon as you progress forward, everything that was written before is forgotten to give room for the now. So every time I make one of these statements, I'm only working off of information that still exists because it was perpetuated into the next moment, because it was willed into the future. There was once a video that I made that referred to if I wanted to. And maybe you didn't like that. If you could separate every atomic particle in the entire universe and stop its motion completely and keep them separate for a prolonged period of time, they would just evaporate into nothing. And instantaneously the universe is deleted after a certain amount of that time. All the complexity of everything that ever existed can be demolecularized. And it's not that they would split apart like a Thanos snap. It's that, well, they would, but it would all happen instantaneously. you wouldn't see it. In one moment you're there, in another moment you're fuzzy, and in another moment you have disappeared completely. Perhaps it does look like a final snap. I don't think we're in a simulation, and I still don't know how we can go backwards and forward in time any differently than we already are. I'll get back to you on that.